What does it all mean?
This is where the archaeology has been found.
Oh, hi, how are you? Oh, look at that.
I need a planter. A shrine to a belly button. This is a rock salt? Look at that.
No one gets into this, but no one.
Whoa, don't take me too far.
Now that's naked archaeology.
Rome, the heart and foundation of the Christian Church, home to some of the most magnificent structures on the planet, and some of the tastiest dishes. It is a beautiful goddess above ground and a dark guardian of the most intricate tombs below. There is no doubt that Rome in all its splendor is distinctly Roman. Or is there? Some say that over 2,000 years ago, many of the influences on Romans, from the way they built their buildings, to the ways in which they prayed, to the food that they ate, to the ways that they buried and venerated their dead, all of these were influenced by their sworn enemies, the Jews. But that just sounds like the musings of a proud Jewish grandmother. Just as a Scottish grandmother believes that all great things were created by the Celts, or the Greek grandmother can prove that the best inventions, sports, and disciplines have Greek roots.
Pretty wonderful, eh, Archimedes?
Can we really uncover evidence of a Jewish-inspired ancient Rome? Didn't Rome conquer Judea?
The people of Judea shall pay an extraordinary tax.
How could the customs and religion of the conquered transform the conquerors?
What's your name?
To answer these questions, I need to dig deep into the Jewish history of Rome.
I'm standing right at the Forum. This was the heart of ancient Rome. This is the place where the tourists flock, because this was it. This was downtown. The Senate building, all the great structures, the big business, the power game was right here, the heart.
And it was right here in 70 CE that the Roman Emperor Vespasian decided to send his many legions into Jerusalem. The city had been occupied by Rome for some 70-odd years, and now the Jews had revolted, and so Rome sacked the city. They burgled the many riches from Jerusalem's temple and knocked it down. They returned to Rome with over 10,000 Jewish slaves in tow, and they paraded them right through this forum. But Roman historian Leah Klein tells me that it would have been a horrific and sad parade for many of the onlookers.
We're talking about the defeat of Judea. Meanwhile, there were Jews in Rome. I mean, Rome was not just Roman.
There were probably 11 synagogal communities in Rome.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of synagogal communities, but they were named after the emperor. So they took it seriously that they were Roman and Jewish at the same time.
They went to the baseball games. Yeah?
Absolutely. They certainly played Roman, and they did everything that a Roman would do, except for their own particular needs as Jews and their own religious traditions. There were at least 30,000 Jews in Rome in the 1st century CE.
Not counting slaves.
Not counting slaves. 30,000 Roman citizens who were Jewish.
That's a lot of citizens.
Which means that they certainly had a voice in Rome.
They had a voice. And now with the influx of slaves, 20,000 more hands. Albeit slave hands. And it's what those hands did that you might find surprising. Within a stone's throw of the Forum is the greatest monument of the Roman Empire, the Colosseum. And while it has stood for almost 2,000 years as an example of brilliant Roman engineering and architecture, historian Alan Epstein tells me thousands of its builders have never been truly recognized.
The Colosseum begins to be built immediately after the conquest of the Jews in 70 AD. In conquering the Jews, the Romans are conquering a people who's obviously much older than they are. The Romans as a people could only, for the past several hundred years before this conquest, they could till the soil and they could fight. They were farmers and they were warriors. There wasn't much else. when they begin to conquer the other peoples in the Mediterranean, now they're elevating their culture because they're conquering people who have an older traditions. And now, obviously, Jews have been masons for thousands of years, going back to Jerusalem to 2000 BC. And what you get is the intelligence of building together with the Roman genius, because remember, they are great builders. They are fabulous engineers. And so together, the Romans and the Jewish slaves who are brought back as teachers for building build this amazing amphitheater that, of course, is the largest amphitheater in the Roman world.
Slaves, but master builders. There are probably countless buttresses and joints in this megalithic amphitheater that are crafted and inspired by Jewish master masons. Still standing after 2 millennia. That's some nice work. But when the job was done, the demand for slaves slumped. Because of huge supply, the bottom dropped out of the slave market in Rome. Slaves once worth a few large aureus were now sold for a few dupandi. That's going from gold to bronze for you barbarians out there. It was a good thing for the Jewish slaves, though, because it meant that many of them were able to buy back their freedom.
It's for me, for my wife, and for my family. One.
And you might be surprised that after that, most of them didn't leave Rome. Why? It's around 80 CE in Rome, 10 years after the legions sacked Jerusalem and brought home thousands of Jewish slaves to build things like the Colosseum. Many slaves have bought their own freedom, but they're not going back to Judea. After tossing their Roman captors, they find themselves injected into a Jewish community so well established that it offers a welcome home away from home. Flash forward 2,000 years to the long-standing Jewish area in Rome, and I get the details from Alan Epstein.
Remember that this was a city, for the most part, where Jews were not particularly mistreated throughout the centuries. One of the reasons, of course, is because there had been such an old Jewish community. This is the longest continuous Jewish community in the world since at least 161 BC. That's the first documented presence of Jews. So at least 2,200 years, and no other city can claim this continuous presence of Jews that Rome has.
The first Jews came here voluntarily, long before the Roman conquest of Judea. They came in 161 BCE during the Maccabean era. The book of Maccabees tells us that they came as envoys to negotiate protection from the invading Syrians. The Romans were happy to oblige and lend their brawn to help Judea maintain its independence. Many of these Jews stayed in Rome and organized a Jewish community.
The reason why they come here is because Rome has become the masters of the universe. They've conquered the Western Mediterranean. They're now going toward the Eastern Mediterranean, and so...
This was where the action was.
This is where the action is. Makes sense to send a delegation of ambassadors and merchants and begin to open up trade with these people who are now obviously going to rule the roost here.
And with the establishment of such a strong Jewish community in Rome came all the cross-cultural influences that you would expect. From restaurants to synagogues, from food all the way to religion. But before we taste the transitions in theology, let's sample the conversions of cuisine. There is a particularly tasty dish that has been on the Roman menu for over 2 millennia.
Jewish artichokes.
Jewish artichokes, right? You know, these artichokes are pressed between bricks and fried. And of course, you know, fried food and very, very well-baked food has always been part of the Jewish tradition in order to stave off health hazards.
High cholesterol is a Jewish thing.
It's a Jewish trait, right?
These artichokes have been made this way for thousands of years, and they taste yummy still.
Buon appetito!
And it wasn't just tasty Jewish food recipes that tantalized Romans' tongues in 1st and 2nd century Rome. There were some Jewish recipes for the soul that caught the Roman appetite.
Worst storm ever saw in Jerusalem.
This was a time when Rome was in great religious transition. It would take less than 330 years after Rome sacked Jerusalem for the Roman Empire to switch from a pagan, multi-god religion to the single god of Christianity. And who was responsible for giving birth to that?
Let's face it, All the original popes were Jews because Peter was a Jew, and all of the original apostles and disciples, these were Jews who said that Jesus was in fact the Messiah. And so at the beginning, there was no real separation between Christians and Jews. It was only after the famous St. Paul, he was the one who set out all of the first rules and the first principles of Christianity. And the thing that he said that has great significance is he said, you don't have to limit this to Jews. Of course, it is the fulfillment of Judaism, but that's really secondary to the idea that all the world should hear the good news. Convert the Gentiles, he said. Convert everyone. It's now something that is open to the whole world. And that universal religion spills out all through the Roman Empire.
So, the Jewish-inspired Jesus-following, Jews who believed Jesus was the Messiah, gives birth to Christianity. Paul makes it extremely palatable for Gentiles, and Christianity becomes a tasty dish for many Roman souls. And before the very hard and fast lines were drawn between Roman pagan, Roman Christian, and Roman Jew, there seems to be a significant absorption of an entirely Jewish ritual. Suddenly, the majority of people in Rome begin to change the ways they bury their dead.
He's a total man. He's a total man.
By the beginning of the 4th century, Christianity had taken hold of Rome. The good word, hatched in Jerusalem and handed off by the apostles Peter and Paul, is now the official word and religion of the Roman Empire. Its roots, as we now know, can be traced to Jewish origin. And although the Romans at the time might not have cared to admit it,
It's all your fault.
the roots and influences of their on and off again enemy, the Jews, could be found deep under Roman soil.
Okay, let's go inside because I would like to show you.
This is the entrance to a wine cellar for an upscale restaurant in Rome.
Incredible.
But it was once a columbarium, a vault built to contain the ashes of the Roman dead. And it's here that I meet with historian Mino Carbone to learn more about the evolution of Roman burial practices. We're in a wine cellar in Rome, which used to be a tomb. It's what Romans used before the Common Era, before Christianity. So this is before they started inhumation, before they started burying
yes.
bodies. They cremated them.
Yes.
They brought it here.
Yeah, and they put just the urns in some particular niches.
The urns, like that niche
like
over
that,
there?
very good.
There would be an urn, it would be in the niche.
In the niche over there. Have a look just here. This is a very perfect columbarium, intact. We can see the niche, and then we can see inside 2 holes in which they left just the urn. Then at the end, they added on the top just a marble stone with the name written on the marble.
We're looking at this rock, which is closing an original niche, and behind this rock, there's still
It looks like that one.
probably an urn with ashes.
Yes.
But then they started putting it in the catacombs, entire
In the
body.
catacombs, very well. Rome, according to the geology of the country, is very suitable to create this kind of loculis, which is just a place where people can be buried without any coffin. The tufa stone is very soft. It was very easy to go underground to create a line of tombs, to leave the body there and wait for the resurrection. In my personal opinion, it started from the first Jews that came to live in Rome.
So
Soon
the
after,
Jews and Christians?
Christians.
Maybe
yes.
Judeo-Christians, Jews, Christians?
Maybe Judeo-Christian together, because it was a mixture, a merging between the Jewish tradition to the Christian ones, and they started to create this kind of cemeterium, which means a place to sleep. So they left the body to lie down until the resurrection.
Back in Jerusalem, for the entire 1st century, the archaeology shows that Jews buried their dead in a unique way. They would first lay the body in a rock-hewn tomb on a carved-out shelf called an arcocelia. After a year, the bones were gathered and put inside a small stone coffin called an ossuary. The ossuary was then placed in a carved-out niche inside the tomb. Could this Jewish tradition have moved to Rome and influenced the early Christian burial practices? The archaeology shows that around the 2nd century, the Romans switched from columbaria to catacombs, no longer cremating, but leaving the body intact on a carved-out rock shelf. So it was a transition from tombs for ashes to tombs for bodies.
Yes, it's just a kind of a continuity.
And you think it has, the transition in style of burial has something to do with the idea of resurrection?
I'm quite sure that this tradition started because they wanted to commemorate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I'm quite sure of this.
And right now you say there's really good wine here.
Yes, the temperature is perfect.
Sicuramente. Prego.
Ok, assaggio solamente io. Oh, grazie Franco.
Notevole morbidezza. È molto rotondo e opulento questo vino.
Did you know the secret of a good wine is when you...
Is a good tomb.
Is a good tomb.
Because it gives it a good body.
Come on, yes.
Nino and Franco were distracting me with wine, but I managed to move from grapes back to graves.
It looks like normal niches.
If the Romans switched from cremation to inhumation because of a Jewish influence, where's the archaeological evidence in Rome? The answer lies below suburbia, underneath the summer residence of one of the most infamous fascist dictators. For thousands of years, Rome has hidden a massive matrix of Christian catacombs under its surface. But it wasn't until 1918 that some of the oldest catacombs were discovered underneath the summer residence of none other than the fascist frontman Mussolini. Over 4,000 burial niches were found, carved into long tunnels below the dictator's tennis courts. And what was most interesting was the artwork and inscriptions on the catacomb walls. They showed that these tombs were not Christian. Catacomb chaperone Michaela Vitali guides me through the maze. We can only stay down here for 45 minutes at a time because of the high levels of CO2 and radon gas.
How old is this?
From the end of the 1st century, Common Era.
Common era?
Common Era.
The body used to be put here.
Yes.
There's a skull here. This is incredible. It's perfect shape. This is called a cubicula.
Cubicola, arcosolia with the arch.
They closed it up.
Okay.
Yeah, so the bones weren't exposed in
No,
ancient
no,
times.
absolutely not.
And these are still sealed here, down
Yes.
here? This is the way actually they all would have been, right?
Right.
See, this is very clear here. Tomb raiders have broken most of the seals that covered these graves. But at one time, the names of the dead were inscribed on brick and plaster. Very few of the inscriptions have survived, but their origin cannot be mistaken. So what does it say here? Do you know?
And this is Ensade it's the formula of Here Lies.
Here lies, yeah.
Judah, this is Judah. Judah.
So it is a
Yes.
Jewish name, a Hebrew name.
Name.
Michaela shows me more inscriptions and more Jewish names. The evidence strongly suggests that these 1900-year-old catacombs are entirely Jewish. And then Michaela shows me the treasure gem.
Wow.
This is an arcosolia. This is the temple. But
Temple?
symbol of the temple.
Wow. This is breathtaking. Oh my goodness. Menorah with the lights burning. Next to it is you have temple oil, like in Hanukkah, right? You have the temple oil, it'll be needed again. Next to it, you have the temple with the Torah scrolls in the center.
And we have the sun, the star, and the moon.
The star, that's the star of the Messiah.
Sure.
Referencing the line in the Bible, a star will come out of Judah, referring to the Messiah.
Sure.
So this is belief in the rebuilding of the temple.
Yeah, exactly.
Belief in the end of days, belief in resurrection, belief in the Messiah, belief in everything.
In the other one, because this is an Aron, it's not a temple.
It's all encoded in this stuff. It's incredible. This arcosolia, decorated with some of the most important symbols of the Jewish faith, proves without a doubt that these catacombs, the oldest found in Rome, are Jewish. It's powerful evidence that the burial rituals were brought from Jerusalem to Rome. Do you think this is related to secondary burial you find in Jerusalem?
I don't know, but I think so.
It looks like the tombs you find in Jerusalem.
Yes, that's true. But here the stone is softer, and we have no ossuaries.
But the absence of ossuaries could simply suggest a burial ritual that was changing. And there seems to be evidence here of something else as well. Some of the symbols on these walls just might show the arrival of Judeo-Christianity to Rome.
Look at that.
Christian.
No,
my
no, no, no,
friend.
no, absolutely not.
Why
So-
not?
Because it's of the fabric of.
What are you talking about? This is a fish.
No, no, no. It's not a fish. It's a mark with the finger. They made a sign to count every brick that go out from the factory.
So it's
Okay.
a mark
A
made
mark
by the people who
make
were
it.
fabricating
Yes,
this brick.
yes.
How do you know that?
Because all of the Roman bricks have this kind of sign.
This sign?
This kind or round signs.
Just to keep count.
Yes. Just to keep count.
Sure, it looks like a fish.
Michaela doesn't see early Christian symbols in these Jewish catacombs, but I see them everywhere.
This is the dolphin, not a Jewish symbol, but around the trident.
Yes.
This is clearly a tail of the dolphin with 3 prongs in the tail. But this is very interesting because the dolphin
It's
is a
not a
symbol.
Jewish symbol
Well, it's a symbol of what?
of the passage to the overworld.
To the other world.
Yes.
So basically, in pagan symbolism,
Yes.
the dolphin, just like a dolphin accompanies,
The ships.
they accompany the spirits
Could be.
to the other
yes,
world.
Yes.
The trident represents Neptune.
Sure.
The trident together with the dolphin
Yes.
could say that it's a Judeo-Christian symbol. I'm sorry to say that because the trident could be the Trinity and the dolphin represents resurrection. It's taken over from pagan symbolism.
But it's not for Jews.
Well, if it's Jews who might have believed in Jesus as Messiah. Well, you have to agree that the dolphin and the trident is not a typical Jewish symbol.
No. Sure. I don't think so.
So there's a mystery.
Sure. Yes. You can say yes.
The mysteries of who influenced who and where exactly the sources of tradition can be traced will forever plague the archaeologist. We may never know if these ancient catacombs actually contain the remains of the Jewish men and women and later Jewish Christians who provided the theological stepping stones that led to Roman Christianity. But I think we've uncovered enough possibilities in the tombs, the religions, the food, and the buildings of Rome to say with confidence that this city has always had a lot of chutzpah.
He's a tall, tall man from a tall, tall land. He makes no apologies for his archaeology.